The mid to late 90s were a wild time for personal computing. Video games entered their advent of early 3D gaming, and graphical fidelity kept exploding faster than you could keep track of. Computers in general became more commonly accessible until most households would eventually sport a PC. Graphical user interfaces became increasingly sophisticated, allowing for a wider and more easily available bandwidth of utility software such as word processors, early art programs, spreadsheet processors, and dial-up internet became also increasingly more common and started the huge snowball effect of computers infiltrating the lives of everyone. One of the biggest milestones in this development was the release of Microsoft's Windows 95 in 1995, as well as Intel's Pentium processor, eventually with the MMX architecture, which heavily fueled the 90s multimedia boom. Multimedia software was not a new thing around that time. It had been around for a while, but the software and hardware advancements, and especially the rise of the CD-ROM drive, allowed for never-before-seen capabilities in audiovisual presentation on home computer screens. Video games started incorporating full-motion video footage into their gameplay, the FMV boom. I talked about this quite a bit during my Phantasmagoria video. And of course, the eventual unstoppable avalanche of multimedia software was about to flood the market. Famous examples are things like Microsoft's Encarta Encyclopedia, which I still enjoy booting up from time to time to browse around, watch surprisingly intricate animated illustrations, or simply play Mind Maze, a trivia labyrinth filled with absolutely surreal brain-bending and fourth-wall-breaking dialogue. Lightning in a bottle. Besides that, there was a lot, and it was hard not to get swept up by it at the time. Of course, companies quickly realized that since now they can easily use images, video, and sound in more easily accessible ways than ever before, and since people were going absolutely crazy for it, that there was a huge market in shoveling out incredibly cheaply produced multimedia garbage that would sell for a quick buck for easy return on investment. Cash grab shovelware wherever you looked. And for some reason, I couldn't get enough of it. Absolutely loved it, and now, looking back with a nostalgic eye, I have this genuine fondness for rediscovering these trash piles of multimedia exploitation. I don't know what it is, but there's a certain hauntological magic about them to me. Today, I want to talk about a personal favorite of this shoddy multimedia cash grab era, and since I love to cover horror games on my channel, my pick is a truly horrifying example of multimedia shovelware, with none other than Stephen King's name etched into it. Horrifying not because it's so scary, but because it really is that horrifyingly bad. And yeah, I kinda love it for how schlocky it is. So, Gianni, could you read the cover blurb for me in your most shiver-inducing voice, please?
Oh, okay.
All right. The master of horror up close. You thought you were safe. You thought you only had this small hop to get done on your computer. And you thought you had your life under control. But there was this one out-of-the-way key. Remote, menacing, but somehow magically attractive. And your hand began to move Ouija-like toward it, closer, finally touching this mysterious F13 key. Horror lurks behind Stephen King's F13.
Ah, yes. Booting up Windows 95 and having that iconic Brian Eno soundbite blare at you from your speakers, it's always an instant fix of nostalgia serotonin. But what if you get bored by it? What if you're tired of looking at the teal desktop backdrop, the classic 95 sound palette, and the time-worn 3D Myst screensaver? If your answer is, you could install Windows 95 Plus package to make your retro PC experience snazzier and flashier, then you're of course absolutely wrong. What you really need is the unparalleled audiovisual excellence of Stephen King's F13, which is here to frighten up your 90s PC with a unique selection of new DEATHtop backgrounds, screensavers, and a bunch of frighteningly bad sound effects dubbed bumps and thumps. What, you thought this was all? Oh no, there is so much more. So what are we waiting for? Let's check it out. I am lucky enough to be in possession of a sealed copy of this masterpiece of software history, so let's see what's in the box. Alright, so the box itself shows a very green, glowy F13 logo, including the iconic bottom text Ctrl-Alt-SHIVER. And on the backside, we can find some screenshots and a lot of path description, some of which Gianni has so masterfully narrated already, and this interestingly bearded photograph of Stephen King himself. Now let's cut this thing open. It's always such a satisfying feeling to unseal a box, isn't it? Alright, how do we get this thing open? Just one second. Alright, let's see what's inside. So from the first look, this looks all pretty standard. Nothing too crazy. So here we have a printed card of installation instructions, where you also get information on how to install the package's DEATHtop backgrounds and the sound effects and whatnot in Windows 95/98. And then, oh yeah, these, I always love these. Old school printed registration cards that you fill out and then send via mail to the publisher before it was common to get your data online with everything you do. I just love having these and looking at those. It's such a nice time capsule. Alright, next up this is also something I really like. It's called News Guide, but what it essentially is a little brochure of games in the catalog of the publisher. So these I kind of also really love collecting because they always show a snapshot in time of like what games were on the market around certain points in time. So this is also always fun to have. But yeah, that's already it in terms of like additional material. And other than that, we just have the jewel case CD-ROM. And yeah, that's how it looks. And that's all there is to it. So how about we just pop this thing in and install it properly with an installer and then see what this is all about. Once the installer is finished, we get a little icon on the desktop through which we can launch this magnificent multimedia package. It starts off with the publisher and developer logos. Yep, if you thought this was some no-name studio tasked to develop this cash grab package, you'd be dead wrong. F13 was published by BlueByte and developed by none other than Presto Studios, the developer that made the Journeyman Project series, which was one of the very few actually good Myst-likes of the time, and they also ended up developing the really enjoyable Myst 3, which is already a great game in and of itself, but which is propelled to GOAT status by the marvelous performance of Brad Dourif. Considering that these prestigious names were behind F13, it really makes you wonder how they could... Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. Before we get thrown into the main menu, we get to see a short, pre-rendered movie clip zooming in on a keyboard that sports the infamously grisly F13 key, glowing ominously green, while a zombie hand swoops in to do the thing you're not supposed to. Press it. And so, this is what we got. A static main menu with a creepy background music loop and a small selection of sub-menus. Screensavers, DEATHtop backgrounds, bumps and thumbs, the FUNHOUSE, and everything's Eventual. So let's go check them all out.
Harmless screensavers awaken the hidden side within you, and easily installed system sounds send series of shivers down your spine.
Let's start with the screensavers, a selection of 7 background animations you can install for your desktop to prevent your CRT from phosphor burning idling images into its screen. Here in the menu itself though, you only get to see previews in the form of choppy little slideshows. Just like the desktop backgrounds and sound effects, you have to manually set them up, with a little text file on the CD giving you instructions on how to do that. But let's have a look at the proper screensavers. The first one, Murder and Mayhem, shows a typical Maine estate that looks eerily inspired by Stephen King's old house in Bangor, Maine. The house is being sold and a moving company truck drives up and sets everything up. Then it turns night and we see lights turning on in various windows, and the new residents as blackout silhouettes doing day-to-day stuff across the rooms. And a creepy stalker murderer guy appears who, after a minute or so, kills the new resident. A funeral car appears, and the whole scenario starts anew, with different animations and murder scenarios playing out over time. Honestly, this one's actually quite cool. The render look is delightfully late 90s, and there's just something to this diorama playing out on your screen while you're away. It also, unlike many of the other screensavers, has enough going on that constantly changes the entire screen. I'll get to that in a bit. Next up is The Works, which shows an equally delightfully late 90s rendered office room, somewhat messy and cluttered up, while the same bound book cover image floats to the forefront of the screen with shoddily photoshopped captions of various Stephen King novel titles. A super short pad description fades in on the other half of the screen and then fades out a few seconds later. Rinse, repeat. Kind of neat for die-hard fans of the author, I guess, but otherwise a little forgettable. Next up is It's Just Lightning. In that one, we witness a delightfully late 90s rendered basement storage room during a power outage. The ostensible husband of the house enters and tries to repair the breaker box, while behind him, creepy things happen that we catch glimpses of during flashes of lightning, including a murderously autonomous clown puppet that's gone rogue. Corny and campy as hell, definitely one of my favorites from this package.
Finally.
Then we get Terror Eyes, which is just terrifyingly bad. A liver pate colored background with a bunch of eyelids and eyeballs poking out in random arrangement, blinking at random intervals. That's it. Looks absolutely shoddy and is terrible as a screensaver because of the huge amount of screen space that never changes color. Who doesn't want to have their CRT burned in with an even layer of liver pate? Stephen King trivia is in the same vein as The Works. The screen is framed by various moody backdrops such as a guillotine or a window of an ancient building, and over it text captions of random Stephen King related questions fade in, oftentimes very weirdly phrased I might add, followed by the respective answers. It's kind of bland, but I guess it's another one for those absolute diehard fans of Stephen King. Which gets me to Evil Genius at Work. This one is kind of cool and also kind of funny. You see a caricature of King in the corner hacking away at his computer.
Impossible tales pulled from the underside of Stephen King's office chair, where there's dust and dust beneath dust.
The screen itself is framed by a CRT monitor frame with a couple of post-its tacked on top, and we see snippets of some of his words spell out on screen in that gloriously iconic monochrome green font. From time to time, his cat lays down next to him and purrs, and what's really neat is that some of the beats in the text get appropriate sound effects when spelled out, like a thunder striking, a cricket chirping, and of course the cliché dog barking in the distance. Honestly, I think this is a pretty neat screensaver if it weren't for the issue that, again, huge parts of the screen don't refresh, ever, which means if you let this one on for too long, you'll have the frame of a CRT screen burned into your CRT screen. Very meta. The last of the screensavers is Creature in My Room, which shows a delightfully late 90s rendered master bedroom at night with some guys sleeping under the sheets and occasional little animations happening. A strange tube-like monster descends from the ceiling, about to suck the sleeper's blood or viscera, dispelled by the sound of police sirens for whatever reason. The gargoyle in the background comes to life, and a set of chattering teeth skulking around under their bed, among a couple of other short animatics. This one's also kind of campy neat, but again, it has the same issue as the other ones. There's a good bit of screen space here that doesn't ever change pixels. But, if you use it on a modern screen, that shouldn't be a problem. Now, so much for the screensavers. Now, let's have a look at the DEATHtop backgrounds. While some of these screensavers have a certain campy, dorky coolness factor to them, these backgrounds are overall pretty lackluster. 10 still images, many of which are just screenshots from the screensavers or the games, we'll get to them. We have a delightfully late 90s render image of a close-up of a cockroach nibbling on a severed finger on a wooden desk surface. That's kind of the neatest in my opinion. A giant screen-filling backlit caption of Stephen King's name, the F13 logo as shown in the intro movie, several animation stages of the clown puppet from the It's Just Lightning screensaver, a nighttime render of a vintage car in front of a spooky mansion, and Dayboard, which shows a corkboard filled with little snippets, post-its, and Polaroids, which I believe is supposed to show Stephen King's drafting board. And that's it. Nothing special, but if you're in a pre-internet age, you might be pretty happy to have some new cool shit to put on your desktop, I guess. That's how it was for me back in the day. I'll get to that too. The third category of desktop enhancement are the bumps and thumps sound effects. It's a small collection of 20 vaguely horror-related sound effects that you can, if you want to, use to customize your Windows desktop theme in the most obnoxious way possible. Imagine your mouse cursor making an axe chop sound every time you click it, or hearing a raven caw every time you open a new window. Delightful. Of course, we'll have to replace that boring old Brian Eno Windows 95 startup song with something much more sophisticated. The iconic, cliché dog barking in the distance. But hey, aside from the smorgasbord of desktop customization assets, there's also the funhouse, i.e. actual games. Yeah, you heard right. Stephen King's F13 doesn't just come with one, but 3 creepy games in one package. I can hardly contain my excitement, as you can hear. This seems too good to be true.
It ain't.
So, what do we got? The first one is no swimming. Let's have a look. So, essentially, No Swimming is not really a game at all, but a virtual aquarium in which a bunch of piranhas swim around a pre-rendered and choppily animated, aquarium. It's most definitely inspired by the iconic marine aquarium screensaver series. LGR did a pretty interesting video on that one a couple of months ago, links in the description. But No Swimming looks on pretty much every level far inferior to that. And it really isn't a game at all. It's more like an interactive screensaver, which you can't use in an actual screensaver. Your only interaction is that you can feed the piranhas various animals, including a dog, a horse, a cow, an alligator, and a freaking rhinoceros, which, when dropped in the water, are completely off-scale and much smaller than the actual piranhas themselves, and every feeding ends in a frenzy of bubbles and gore, which I think is supposed to be shocking, but there's so little to see, plus it gets even an average to strong computer of the era to stutter, that it feels more confusing than anything. But that's really all there's to it. Oh, no, wait. If you don't feed the fish for a little while, they will eventually bump and break the glass in front in protest. Yep. Okay, now that's it for No Swimming. But hey, there's more. What's next? Whack a Zombie. I have a feeling where this is going. Well, at least this one can be called a game to begin with. We have a one-screen static background of a cemetery with several open graves from which zombies will rise randomly, and you have to whack them. It's whack-a-mole, with zombies. If you're not fast enough, the zombies will throw bones at you, which will cost you health points until you die. And that's it for game number 2. But hey, there is one more, so let's check out and see what new groundbreaking mechanics will be introduced this time. Bug Splat. It's a tabletop upon which a bunch of creepy crawlies creepy crawl around, and you have to whack them dead, either with a fly swatter, a rolled up newspaper, or a frickin' hammer. Each stage consists of a wave of bugs and larvas emerging, and you have to squish every single one of them before the timer runs out. Which kinda doesn't make the most sense, because the bugs will spawn over time, so even if you're super fast in the beginning, you'll still have to wait for later ones to spawn. And also they can crawl outside of the screen space, which means they still count as alive, but you have no means to reach them. And even worse than in Whack-a-Zombie, the more bug sprites are being spawned on screen, the more it gets even state-of-the-art machines of 1999 to struggle hard until you're playing an interactive slideshow, essentially. So yeah, that's it for the games. 1 interactive screensaver you can't use as a screensaver, and 2 very bare-bones variations of Whack-a-Mole. But now, can someone please tell me what any of these have to do with the works of Stephen King again? Now, for the final part of F13, in my humble opinion, the most substantial piece of Stephen King-related content on this CD-ROM is, of course, the inclusion of an actual novella by the man himself, Everything's Eventual. At the time of release of F13 in 2000, according to the box, it was never before released in book form. That is true, since the story was only previously printed in the October/November 1997 issue of the Magazine of Fantasy and Science Fiction. 2 years later, it would be released in book form in a short story/novella collection that was also dubbed Everything's Eventual. It's a short story about a 19-year-old high school dropout who lives in a luxurious house on behalf of a shady employer who supplies him with everything he asks for, including an envelope of cash on a weekly basis, which he has to spend or discard the rest of it in a drain. In return, he is tasked to draw occult symbols on his Apple computer in relation to targets he receives, a vocation and skill that he himself doesn't quite understand yet. Everything's Eventual is a very decent King novella, a pleasant and suspenseful read that was generally quite well regarded by critics at the time. And it even connects to his greater Dark Tower universe. The protagonist, Richard Dinky Earnshaw, even makes an appearance in the final novel of the series. Here in F13, you can read the novel on your screen, which, especially in the age of CRTs, was not exactly the most comfortable and ergonomic way to consume prose for your eyes, and it's displayed on a backdrop of a worn, bound book with some occult symbols etched into the pages for atmosphere, while a track of suspenseful ambient music loops in the background. To me, this was the most unironically enjoyable part of the whole software package, and since the story is really not that long, it was quite palatable to read it in one go, with the presentation and ambience immersing you in the experience a little bit. But yeah, that's it. That's Stephen King's F13. If you're familiar with my videos, then you'll have noticed that this one was a good bit different. Not only did I feel like covering a non-game, a piece of multimedia entertainment in this case, but I often try to take even some of the most critically panned games of video game history and find something, or many things about it that makes it genuinely worthwhile. The PS1 horror thriller Hell Knight is a great example. Horrendously panned by critics at the time in the West, but if you look at it in good faith, you'll find that it's a genuinely fascinating, forward-thinking foray into something horror gaming had never done before at the time, which might have just been a few years ahead of its time. For the case of Stephen King's F13, which stands at an aggregate score from vintage reviews of a whopping 18%, and I think I was even pretty kind to it, all things considered, but by and large, there's just no way to sweet talk this one. It's such a lackluster cash grab on pretty much every level. Screensavers that don't save your screen, games that have entertainment value of 10 minutes if we're being generous, and that choke even a high-standard PC of the time when it was released. If this was a package that came out in 1995, right around the launch of Windows 95, maybe. But this came out in 1999, 2000 respectively, and was just a complete dumpster fire, designed solely to piggyback off the name of Stephen King. And yet, I can't help but have a strange fondness for it. I know that when I got it for myself, totally pirated by the way, back in '99 as a 15-year-old on my first self-owned PC, I was actually so impressionable that I found it genuinely cool. It felt like having something I wasn't supposed to have, you know? This is not some boring ass, oh look, your desktop shows the inside of your monitor or a tiger or something crap. This was horror, the forbidden corn dog. And I specifically remember feeling so incredibly cool when I had friends over and wicked screams, knife slashes, and the iconic dog barking in the distance blared from my speakers, and I get a grossed out ew from my friends when the giant cockroach popped up as my desktop background. Absolutely worth it. And I also didn't pay a dime for it back then, so. And it's also worth adding, this was a time when the internet was pretty bare bones still, and most households didn't have access at all. So for me, it was an absolute treasure trove, having cool backgrounds, screensavers, and sound effects to stand out among my peers. And zooming out a little, I have this deep fondness and fascination for this era of the multimedia boom, that time when the internet was in its infancy and so much of what's totally common to find on the web these days was accessible through these multimedia CD-ROMs everywhere. There were lots of absolutely amazing examples, like many of the Microsoft Home products for instance, and as I said, a lot of mediocrity and a good heap of absolute stinkers. But still, I don't know, I find myself regularly browsing thrift stores or archive.org for some forgotten multimedia CD-ROMs and genuinely enjoy exploring them. It gives me a warm, fuzzy feeling of immersing myself back into a time when the internet wasn't completely taken over by algorithmic websites and generative AI anywhere you look. Those were the days. And for some reason, from time to time, I just keep booting up Stephen King's F13, no matter how much of a crapshoot it is. Despite everything, to me, it has a certain je ne sais quoi that always manages to evoke a heartfelt cackle from me. And while none of those screensavers are compatible with modern systems, if you want to mess around in Stephen King's F13 yourself, maybe read Everything's Eventual in the most immersive digital environment imaginable, or have minutes of fun with the amazing games in the FUNHOUSE, the wonderful video game preservation blog Collection Chamber has a prepackaged version of the game available for download. This one runs on an emulated 300MHz Pentium MMX virtual machine and a pre-installed Windows 95 operating system, lovingly themed with all the assets from F13, and when you run the file, it boots the OS up and automatically launches F13 for you. Really doesn't get easier than that and works like a charm. Links in the description. So, thanks a lot for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video, even though it was a little bit different from my usual stuff. Let me know if you'd be interested in exploring more oddware like this. There's quite an endless supply of that out there, really. If this is your first video of mine, hey, I'm Ragnar, and on my channel I cover old games, horror games, indie games, and combinations thereof. So go check out my backlog, I'm sure you'll find something that'll intrigue you. We're currently working on a video on Dino Crisis, actually, which I've been wanting to cover for ages, and I'm quite excited for the upcoming months as we plan quite a few genuinely exciting titles to cover, plus one or the other surprise topic. Now, the obligatory pitch, the work of my channel is funded in big parts by monthly donation of my Patreon supporters, and it really is the financial backbone that allows me and everyone working on these videos to keep doing what we love. So if you're considering to pitch in, my heartfelt thanks to you. Here's a link, and I'll see you on the other side.
Today on Stephen King's RagnarRox, shit yourself. Press the button now, which makes you shit yourself in terror.
And with that, I say ta for now, and give my heartfelt thanks and shout out to these top tier supporters. Thwagam, Morgan K, Amber Wiggins, Uziel 1447, Felix D, Chrissy, Teraflops, David Zelenak, J.R. Smith, Angelo Benedetti, Link Hughes, Vasily Prokhorov, 9ball9606, Ronan Crafts, Shannon Blue, Nathan Gillig, Tabby, Giselle, Zodi, Laird Wakala, Kerry George, Sulmatul, Ronan Crom aka Daniel 242172, Matt Goretten, Swiss Hackmod, Hunter Crawford and Margaret Strawn, Thomas Brunner, John Boring, Dana Rosa, LSNHNG, Casper Aram, Aria, Catherine Escobar, Gehennas, Corey Marr, Billy Lott, Jean, Kyle Lee, Sable Cowl, Ari Orson, The Spiral Architect, Sunny Sky, Righteous Itch, Lucas Ferreira Lete, Nikot the Brave, Phoenix Up Above, Aurora Melpomene Crescendo, Henrik van Rensselaer, Kenan Ward, Chuck Taylor, and Vincent Kavanaugh. Until next time, ta-ta.
Shit yourself.